Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a fun one layer slimline card. So I started off with some Distress KRAFT heavy stock and I cut it down to 7 inches. So it's 7 inches by 8.5 inches. And then I'm going to score this at 3.5 inches. So this will make a 3.5 inch by 8.5 inch slimline card. And I went with the KRAFT heavy stock because one, I love it. I love this color. It's a bit darker and deeper than like my Nina Desert Storm, which is my second favorite. Plus, because this is distressed heavy stock, it can handle like mixed media techniques, watercoloring, all the things. So after I made the card base, I'm going to stamp this with a bunch of the Poppy images from Simon's Poppy Perfection stamp set. Love this set. I posted a video not long before this one using it. This is the third so far video, and I'm obsessed. So after I did my previous video, I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, like a rainbow of poppies would look amazing. Rainbows of anything look amazing. So I put this in my MISTI. I lined up all the images and I purposely spaced everything. I wanted to be able to do this all in one go versus like stamping, heat embossing, stamping more, yada, yada, yada. It'd be so much easier if I could just line it up. So that's what I did with this, is pretty much lined up all the florals and the leaf images and the little bud all across what will be the bottom of this card. So once I've got everything lined up, I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool because I want to stamp this in VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink and then clear heat emboss it. Because the coloring I'm planning on doing, I'm going to use my Distress watercolor pencils, and I will have a link at the end of this video to my playlist using Distress watercolor pencils. But because of the nature of the pencils, they're pigmented. If I just stamp an image and then you color them with this, or like watercolor, if you don't avoid the lines, they will sit on top of the stamp lines, etc., which I've shown in other videos, and I'll just like re-stamp it. That's fine. But if you heat emboss it, it just makes it a little easier because the heat embossing kind of resists the watercolor pencils a bit. So anti-static powder tool, inked up the stamps with that Nocturne ink, and then I'm going to cover this with clear embossing powder. This is my like go-to combo with everything. I've talked about this before. I don't like using black embossing powder. If you feel comfortable enough with it, you can. But this is just easier. Just easier, works better. So I use a little brush to remove any of the embossing powder that was, clinging around in a couple spots. It wasn't supposed to be. And then I realized I missed a spot. So quickly poured the embossing powder onto that one little missing area. And then once I've got everything coated, I'll use my heat tool to melt all the embossing powder. You melt it till it's clear and glossy. Doesn't take very long. Make sure there's no areas that are dull and grainy. If they are, you hit it with your heat tool, and then everything is melted and fabulous. And honestly, if a person wanted to, you could almost leave it like this. Like just very clean and simple, because again, these images have enough detail to them. They're just great. However, of course, I'm going to color them because just must. So melt all this with my heat tool. And then, like I said, for the coloring, I am using the Ranger Distress watercolor pencils. I will have a link to the playlist. I will also link separately. I did an entire video showing how I set up this palette because I don't use the pencils themselves because of like borderline carpal tunnel issues. I don't like coloring with pencils, that sort of a thing. So I did up this palette with the shavings. And again, I'll have a link to that video if you missed it. Super, super simple. And this way I've got all the color. It's nice too, because then I have all the colors at hand right here in my little palette. And then I just like using them just like this in the palette. And then just with my little Ranger detail watercolor brush that I've had for years and years and years. And I'll have links to everything, as always, with the supplies. So all I do is swirl my little water brush in the colors I want to use and paint. That's it. Super simple. I also do not have my palette labeled. People ask me that a lot. Like how did I specifically organize the colors? I went in just kind of rainbow order, didn't overthink it. and then I never bothered to label it. And for the most part, it's because I don't need to. Most of the colors, I can tell immediately which ones they are. Like the one I'm picking up, that top left corner of my palette, that is picked raspberry. You just know it, you know? But yeah, I haven't bothered to label them. People also ask, like, can I use like regular watercolor pencils, you know, non-distress? Totally. Like, try it out, see how they look on darker cardstocks. Like, take a scrap, experiment with it, see how it works. I just like the distress ones because they're specifically distress colors. And they're nice. Like, they're creamy and nice. And like, look how they sit on those KRAFT heavy stocks. Like, chef's kiss. But the biggest bonus for me personally, it's because they're in distress colors. Like, I think in distress colors anytime, you know, I'm using my distress inks, my oxides, my sprays, etc., etc. Yeah, it's like, I want a bright pink, picked raspberry. I want, you know, a pretty aqua sort of color, salvage patina. My go-to green blend, twisted citron, and rustic wilderness. You know, like, you think in distress colors. So I went in basically rainbow order. So I did like picked raspberry. I did a villainous potion for that purple, candied apple for the red. That orange, I'm pretty sure, is carved pumpkin. Like I said, it's not labeled, but I have the tin of them. One of these days, maybe I will like go and actually label everything. But sometimes it's just fun to just not bother. You know, I just pick up colors at random. So for the first kind of layer, I just did one color. So it was villainous potion, picked raspberry, the candied apple, carved pumpkin, squeezed lemonade for the yellow one. And then the little sort of aqua color, that one might be Mermaid Lagoon. I'm not 100% positive. No, that one's Uncharted Mariner. Bingo. So that one, and then the blue I think is Salty Ocean. So I did one layer at first. And then for my green, like I said, my go-to combo, I started with Twisted Citron, you know, the most gorgeous bright green ever. And then painted all that in. And then, of course, I'm going to add Rustic Wilderness to that because it must be. This is how it must be. Anytime you guys see me painting with like distress inks, oxides, whatever, I always mix the two. It's just, I did that ink smushing video I did the other day and posted with the little mushrooms and the greenery and everything. Same thing. It was like smushed it with the Twisted Citron. Then I had to add the Rustic Wilderness because it just, that's how it has to be. So that's literally what I did. So I went back in with a bit of the Rustic Wilderness and painted that. And then regardless of what medium you're using, when you are painting or coloring on anything other than a white cardstock or watercolor paper base, always let everything dry because it will always look different once it's dry. Because on darker cardstocks, the moisture from whatever you've colored with, whether it is a watercolor medium or like an alcohol marker medium or a water-based marker medium, the moisture from that will look darker when it's wet. So let it dry and then determine whether or not you want to add more color, layer things, etc., etc. So with these, once it was dry, I wanted to add a little more depth and definition. So then I just started like mixing some colors. So with the yellow, I ended up adding, I think, a little bit of like fossilized amber. With the orange, I was mixing multiples. I think I ended up using, I'm pretty sure it was like fired brick and possibly barn door in the end. And then with candied apple, I added, I'm not even sure, but yeah. Just went in with little bits of darker, you know, here and there, just to give it a little bit more depth. And again, they mix together, they layer together. With picked raspberry, I added a bit of seedless preserves. That's another one of my like favorite combos. There's something about picked raspberry and seedless preserves that makes like that magenta color that everyone has been wanting so bad for so long. Picked raspberry, seedless preserves, mix them together. They're beautiful. Always beautiful. And then with the villainous potion, I actually added a tiny bit of black soot, just a tiny bit to, you know, give it that little extra bit. So then once I was done painting, yeah, and here, this is where I go and add a little bit more to the orange because it was just looking really, very flat. So then I mixed in a little bit more color there just to give it that little extra something. So once I was done painting all of these, I'm of course going to add splatter. So I'm going to tape my card closed first so that I don't get splatter all over the inside as well. So I just used a little bit of washi tape there, tape that closed, put it in my splat box. My first bit of splatter is going to be Ranger Perfect Pearl Powder mixed with water, as always, because it gives the most shimmery, gorgeous look ever. So I put a bit of that onto just my palette, add a little bit of water, swirl that up with my fan brush, and then I'm going to splatter this heavily all over this, all over the card front. And then I'm going to add some gold splatter, of course. So I'm using my Gonzai Tombi gold watercolor that I had already added water to, let it sit for a little bit, swirl that up really, really well to mix it up. And same thing, use my fan brush and added just a heavy amount. You know, for the most part, I wouldn't call this card like clean and simple because, you know, but at the same time, since I'm not adding like layers and dimension, do I need to come up with an excuse? You guys know I love splatter. Anyway, once that was dry, let it dry. You don't want to like get this everywhere. So I let it dry. I had cleaned off my stamps. They're still in my MISTI. I left them like as is. So I let everything dry. I opened the card. So now I'm going to stamp on the inside of the card. And for that, I'm going to use Simon's Cobblestone ink. This is one of my go-tos when stamping on KRAFT cardstocks. It's perfect. Again, chef's kiss. There's just this shade of like brownish gray, you know, cobblestone. It's so perfect. So I stamped that onto the inside of the card. Love. And then I also grabbed, this is one of Simon's slimline grocery bag envelopes. So I kind of lined that up, like the envelope is quite large. You could actually make I think a 4x9 inch slimline would fit in these envelopes. Let me double check the size here. Yeah, if it wasn't dimensional, you could definitely do like a 4x9 inch slimline card. For me, it's just easier to make 3.5 by 8.5 because you just one cut, score, done. So inked up the stamps again with that cobblestone ink, stamped it onto the envelope, and again, just love. You know, it's very neutral, and that's what I love, like very neutral looking envelope, but then you'll open it up and, you know, pull out the card and it's like, ooh, rainbow. Rainbow, splatter, shimmery goodness. So now for the sentiment. This is the most kind of nerve-wracking in a sense because, you know, you don't want to mess it up. However, if I had messed it up, because it happens, I would have just stamped the sentiment again onto most likely just like a piece of the KRAFT HEAVYSTOCK, either stamped or heat embossed it, and then die cut it and stuck it on top. You know, because it's like I've already colored it, splattered it, you know, the card is basically nearly complete. So if I had messed up the sentiment, yeah, restamp it and either like trim it out or fussy cut it or die cut it, whatever, and then stick it on top because we ain't letting all that work go to waste. But thankfully it worked. So I stamped the sentiments from the set with that same Nocturne ink. No heat embossing with those, just stamped it. And then gold vellum. Some of you even comment, I showed in a recent video I was going on about gold vellum and people were like, I've never heard of it. I don't know where you guys have been. I have shown gold vellum in so many videos. Love. It was really hard to get for a long time because I'd got some years and years and years ago, and I still have my little pack that I save every little scrap of it. Anyway, more recently in the last couple-ish months, Tonic released several vellums, and they're beautiful. They're all beautiful. But they also released the gold, and I got this pack as soon as possible. It's wonderful. At the moment of doing this voiceover, I think it is sold out, but they will restock it. Must have in your stash. Get yourself a pack of gold vellum because it's beautiful. So I die cut it with Simon's Flickering Butterflies wafer die. Again, I've used these wafer dies in a bajillion videos, and mostly with vellum because they're just beautiful. Whether it's gold vellum, regular vellum, shimmer vellum, they're so pretty, you know? So I just adhere them with the teensiest little dab of KRAFT Tacky Glue. When adhering vellum, generally, yes, you can see the adhesive through the vellum. However, with these, I find it completely irrelevant. The little tiny dab of glue, and I just, you know, stick it right in the center of the butterflies, you know, where the body would be. You can't even notice it, like, at all. So I adhered them to the outside of the card and, you know, kind of popped up, like folded the butterflies a little bit so the wings pop up, and yet I still consider this a completely flat card because they're vellum, they'll lay flat. And then on the inside of the card, I just adhered a few more. I didn't stamp a sentiment or anything on the inside of the card. I will write over all of this. Don't have a problem with it, you know. So after I adhere my butterflies, everything that's left over, I put right back in the packaging. So next time I pull this out, it's like, ooh, I've got like a little stash of pretty gold vellum. There's some glitter ones, all, you know, random little things in that package. I just dump it out and it's like, oh, don't have to die cut anything. They're ready to go. So once those are all adhered and the glue's dried, this card is complete. It was lots of fun. Can't go wrong with rainbows. Love. Like I mentioned earlier, I will have links at the end of the video. I'll link to the playlist using those watercolor pencils, the other videos I did with this stamp set, all the things. There'll be a link below the video to my blog post and links to all the supplies I used. You can check that out below if you're interested. As always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. It is very much appreciated and it helps a ton. Subscribe if you haven't. I would love to have you. And stay tuned because I will have more videos coming very, very soon. So I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.